back to another Worth a Read, where I'll be giving you a spoiler-free description of a book, giving you my opinions, and letting you know if I think it's worth your time. In today's video, I am reviewing Blood for Coins by Cam Wolfe. Now, some of you guys might know Cam Wolfe from his YouTube channel, Wolf the Story Nomad. Honestly, I think his channel deserves so much more love, so go check out his videos if you're interested. Now, Cam is somebody I do consider a friend here on YouTube. We've collaborated on a few videos before, and he did give me a review copy of Blood for Coins. But with all that being said, this is 100% going to be a completely honest review. All of these thoughts are my own, and I'm going to keep the review as unbiased as possible. So I know that people are very hesitant going into YouTubers' books in the first place, but I have to say that I was very surprised when it came to Blood for Coins. Now, this is a little bit on the shorter side. Blood for Coins is the first in the Saber's Noctum series. It's a novella that's around 200 pages long, or about 4 hours and 20 minutes on Audible, and while I would have liked it to be a little bit longer, it does manage to pack a lot into those 200 pages, and it makes me excited for the next installment in the Saber's Noctum. Now, Cam has mentioned wanting to see more short form, like fun fantasy, and he's basically pitching the idea with Saber's Noctum that this is going to be an episodic fantasy adventure that's sort of a mix between The Witcher and Supernatural. And for me, being a fan of that sort of monster of the week type of stories, that's something that interested me right away. And I think if you are a fan of the Dresden Files, then you might be interested in this as well. I love those type of like I said, monster of the week fantasy adventures where there is an overarching plot, but it's kind of spread out in the background and it doesn't need to be solved in order to enjoy the characters and the crazy adventures that they go on. One of the things that I love so much about the Witcher video games is all of the amazing side quests. You can veer off from the main quest to help an old lady hunt some wraiths that live in her manor, or investigate a mysterious murder with lots of twists and turns, or save a village from some monster terrorizing the people. Fantasy like this that sort of feels like a D&D campaign just opens up a lot of opportunities for some crazy fun adventures. And with that being said, it's time to talk about the story. The story follows two seasoned mercenaries, Enzo and Rascal. These two have been doing odd jobs and taking contracts most their lives, doing the jobs that most people don't want to do. The story starts with Enzo being transported through a wasteland from the most dangerous prison in the world, where he was locked up for the last 3 years. As the caravan rolls through the Sa-Tika Desert, also known as the Hyena Wasteland, it seems like there's no hope of escaping. But of course, through a series of fortunate but also kind of unfortunate circumstances, he's able to escape and reunite with his good friend, Rascal. Enzo and Rascal end up seeking refuge in a small town as the army is searching for the escaped prisoner. However, the town is ruled over by this wine-guzzling lord who has a very dark secret that ends up putting the duo in danger. This is a very dangerous world, filled with terrifying monsters and bandits and magic and, you know, people are the worst. But I wouldn't say this is a super, grimdark world. There's a lot of whimsy here as well. And for such a short novella, there is a lot of really interesting world building going on, and we get it in little bits and pieces. And that's something that Cam does well. He doesn't just info dump everything, he kind of delivers the world through the characters, and the characters, obviously, they're very familiar with this world, so we, the reader, don't get hand-fed anything. It's all, we get little cookie crumbs to piece together and learn about this world, and typically that's how I like world building to be done. I think that's how it should be done. The downside is that now I'm just waiting for the next volume, since this was a fairly short story, and I really want to learn more about this world. But everything from the savage hyena-like creatures that roam the sand dunes in packs and have this insatiable hunger, to the parasitic flesh worms known as the vole that cling to ships and then feed on the eyes of the poor sailors during the night, and also just the interesting alchemical magic system that's kind of been introduced a little bit. All of this makes me want to continue reading and learn more about the world. There's these soldiers known as vultures, and some of them have this metallic gauntlet that like shoots out fire, kind of reminds me of using Igni in The Witcher, and there's just so much more little little details that I find really interesting, and it makes me feel like this world is much grander than what we're seeing. And then there's also this terrifying villain known as the Revenant, who's kind of introduced later on, and I'm excited to see how the protagonists are going to handle dealing with that and what crazy shenanigans they're gonna get into. Now, it is the characters that are the main selling point of Blood for Coins. I am always a fan of the assassin, rogue, or thief characters, and Enzo and Rascal are definitely very entertaining. The duo feels very distinct from each other, but not exactly how I thought they would be going into this. Just looking at the book cover, I thought that Enzo seemed more like the, you know, mischievous jokester character, than Rascal in the back, despite his name, seems like maybe he's more the serious, straight guy type of character, but they're actually both pretty similar in how mischievous they are. But at the same time, they do manage to feel unique in their different voices and the experiences they've been through. Like Enzo being in the most terrible prison for 3 years, you can tell that that's had a big effect on him as a person. He definitely seems to be dealing with some trauma and struggling with some PTSD. Now, while Enzo is the point of view character, I was surprised that Rascal is very proactive. He's not the typical sidekick character. It's actually his actions a lot of the time that's guiding the story. I love the banter between them. They sort of have this brother relationship, and it truly feels like they've known each other for a long time, and they've been through a lot of crazy adventures together. Now, there is a few side characters I found interesting as well, but they definitely don't have as much depth as Enzo and Rascal, of course, because this first book is trying to introduce the protagonists. Okay, moving on to talk about the writing and the prose itself. I don't really have a whole lot to say here. Cam's writing is very to the point. It's nothing flowery. The story is very quickly paced, and there's always something going on. It never really slows down, and with it being a short novella, it's very easy to read. I listened to the audiobook at like 1.25 speed as I was packing things up to move into my new place here, and I listened to the whole thing in one sitting, and I was still packing things up, so I wanted to listen to more, but my interest never really wavered at all. I wouldn't say it's like a page turner where I need to see what happens next, but I was just enjoying my time with these characters. Now it is time to talk about some negatives. Like I said, this is an honest review. I feel like if I don't mention negatives and I'm reviewing a friend's book, then people are gonna think I'm not being honest. That's not the case. It is difficult to talk about negatives here because I didn't have a whole lot to critique. I actually had to sit down and really think about what to critique with this book. But I did notice there is a few times where there's some sentences that seem a little over-explained, and this ends up making them feel a little clunky. And again, with Cam's prose, it is very straightforward. I would say the writing is just kind of fine. It doesn't really stand out in a good or a bad way, but I will say, this being an indie published book, I've read some traditional published books that are much more dull. And then with the audiobook, overall, I would say I really enjoyed the audiobook. The narrator does a fantastic job. Cam actually uploaded like a demo of the audiobook, which I'll link in the description if you want to give it a listen and see if it's something you'd be interested in. I really liked the narrator, but there were a couple times where I think his cadence might have been a little bit off. There was some pauses between words that I didn't really think needed a pause. And then also there's some cases where you can hear the clipping, where I think in editing they didn't quite clip it well enough. So you can kind of hear where they abruptly cut it, you know, kind of like when you're watching a YouTube video, you see what I did there, but it wasn't so often that it was immersion breaking. It wasn't really that big of a deal, but it's something I noticed, so I thought I'd mention it. But overall, my main negative is just that I want to read more. I want to learn more about this world. I found the world building to be very interesting, but now I just want to continue and learn more. So I'm really hoping that there won't be a super long gap between the next volume. I don't think there was enough in this short novella to get super invested, but I know this is just like episode 1 of a much longer series. So is Blood for Coins worth a read? I would say yes, especially if the idea of an episodic fantasy interests you. If you're a fan of the Dresden Files, or The Witcher, or Supernatural, then yes, I would definitely recommend Blood for Coins. And if you enjoy a fun fantasy adventure that's on a smaller scale, that isn't overly dark or pessimistic, then I would definitely recommend reading it. It's very quick-paced and engaging, and there's some twists and turns in there. Now, I am all about supporting indie authors. I think it's important to do that as readers, because there's some fantastic stories out there like this that just aren't going to get as much attention, maybe, as a traditionally published fantasy book. So, if this does pique your interest, I will have links in the description to where you can buy Blood for Coins in all different formats, and let me know in the comments what you think about Monster of the Week fantasy or episodic fantasy. I would love to hear your thoughts, and as always, a big thank you to all of my channel members and my patrons.